I came home from court to find my husband, Marcus, chained to our front gate like a criminal. The metal handcuffs bit into his wrists as he sat in his wheelchair, unable to reach the release mechanism. Standing over him with a clipboard and that trademark smirk was Patricia Kellerman, HOA Compliance Director and the neighbourhood's self-appointed dictator. Unauthorised mobility device blocking pedestrian access, she announced to the small crowd of neighbours. Code violation 7.2b, the subject will remain secured until proper removal can be arranged. Marcus looked up at me with exhaustion in his eyes. The same eyes that had fought for our country before an AD stole his legs and nearly his life. Now he was being treated like property by a woman who thought a clipboard made her a cop. "Patricia," I said, voice deadly calm, "unlock those cuffs right now," she laughed. "Mrs. Rivera, your husband's wheelchair creates a safety hazard when parked outside regulation zones. HOA policy clearly states, I don't care about your fake policies," I interrupted. "You've just committed aggravated assault, unlawful imprisonment, and violation of ADA rights. As the district attorney for this county, I'm placing you under citizen's arrest." The colour drained from Patricia's face like someone had pulled a plug. "I'm Elena Rivera, and I've been prosecuting criminals for 15 years. But I never thought I'd find one terrorising my own husband in our front yard. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching. I love connecting with viewers who believe justice should protect everyone." This wasn't Patricia's first power trip. For 6 months, she'd been systematically targeting our family with increasingly aggressive compliance actions. It started with parking citations when Marcus's medical transport van parked in our driveway. Then came fines for his wheelchair ramp being architecturally inconsistent with neighbourhood standards. Patricia had turned the HOA into her personal fiefdom, complete with security badges she'd ordered online and enforcement authority she'd simply declared herself to have. She carried zip ties, a radio, and now apparently handcuffs, acting like she was running a prison instead of a homeowner association. What made it worse was her targeting pattern. Marcus, because of his disability, Mrs. Chen, for her accent and cultural decorations. The Rodriguez family, for speaking Spanish in their own backyard. Patricia wasn't enforcing community standards, she was enforcing her prejudices. The handcuff incident was her biggest escalation yet. She'd waited until I left for court, then ambushed Marcus while he was checking our mailbox. According to the security footage I'd review later, she'd accused him of loitering in a restricted zone and demanded he move his wheelchair immediately. When Marcus explained he lived there and was simply getting our mail, Patricia declared it a compliance emergency and restrained him for community safety. She'd left him there for over an hour, helpless and humiliated, while she went door to door gathering witness statements from neighbours too afraid to challenge her authority. But Patricia had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I was just another suburban housewife who would back down from her intimidation tactics. She had no idea she'd just committed multiple felonies against a prosecutor's husband. That night, I didn't just comfort Marcus, I began building a federal case. As district attorney, I'd seen plenty of abuse of power, but this was different. This was personal and systematic, and it was happening in residential communities across America. I started with the evidence, security footage showing Patricia restraining Marcus without authority, medical documentation of the wrist injuries from the handcuffs, witness statements from neighbours who'd been too frightened to intervene. Most damning was Patricia's own documentation. She'd photographed Marcus in restraints and filed it as successful compliance enforcement. The legal violations were staggering: false imprisonment, assault, civil rights violations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and impersonation of law enforcement. Each charge carried serious prison time, especially when targeting disabled individuals. I contacted Agent Sarah Kim from the FBI's Civil Rights Division. "Elena, if an HOA official is using restraints on disabled residents, we're looking at federal hate crime enhancements. This isn't just local harassment, it's systematic discrimination." We discovered Patricia's authority was entirely fabricated. The HOA Charter contained no provisions for physical enforcement, weapons, or detention powers. She'd simply bought equipment online and started acting like a police officer, counting on residents being too intimidated to challenge her. Most disturbing was her victim selection. A review of her enforcement logs revealed she exclusively targeted elderly residents, minorities, and disabled individuals. People she viewed as vulnerable and unlikely to fight back. Her notes contained language like compliance probability high and resistance factor minimal. Patricia had turned our neighborhood into a testing ground for domestic terrorism, and she documented her crimes in meticulous detail. Patricia's preliminary hearing was packed. Word had spread through the community about the handcuff incident, and residents who'd suffered under her regime filled every seat. She arrived wearing a business suit and carrying her ever-present clipboard, still convinced her HOA position would protect her. Judge Martinez called the court to order. Ms. Kellerman, you're charged with aggravated assault, false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and impersonation of law enforcement. How do you plead? Patricia's lawyer stood confidently. Not guilty, Your Honor. My client was acting within her authority as HOA compliance director. The alleged victim was in violation of clearly posted regulations. That's when I stood up from the prosecutor's table. Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant has no legal authority whatsoever to detain residents, use restraints, or enforce any regulations beyond filing complaints with proper authorities. Patricia's eyes went wide as she recognized me. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, who suddenly looked very concerned. I continued addressing the court. The defendant systematically targeted disabled residents, elderly individuals, and minorities using fabricated authority and weapons she had no right to possess or deploy. She handcuffed my husband, Marcus Rivera, a disabled veteran, to our front gate for over an hour because she didn't like where he parked his wheelchair. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Martinez banged his gavel for order. Patricia finally found her voice. I didn't know she was ... he was blocking ... The regulations clearly state ... double quotes. Ms. Kellerman, Judge Martinez interrupted. Are you claiming you didn't know assault with restraints was illegal regardless of your victim's profession? Her lawyer tried damage control. Your Honor, my client believes she was acting within HOA guidelines. There are no guidelines, I cut in, because no HOA has authority to handcuff residents. The defendant invented powers that don't exist and used them to terrorize vulnerable community members. The state charges were just the beginning. Agent Kim's FBI investigation revealed Patricia's activities violated multiple federal statutes. The systematic targeting of disabled and minority residents qualified as a hate crime under federal law. During her deposition, Patricia's true motivations became clear. When asked why she'd handcuffed Marcus, she said, people like him need to understand they can't just park wherever they want because they're in wheelchairs. Rules apply to everyone. When pressed about her enforcement methods, she added, sometimes you need to make examples. Show the community that compliance isn't optional. She'd confessed to premeditated discrimination on the record. The federal indictment was devastating. Conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights, assault under color of authority, and hate crime enhancements for targeting disabled individuals. Patricia faced up to 25 years in federal prison. Her HOA enablers weren't spared either. The board president, who'd allowed Patricia to operate unchecked, faced charges for conspiracy and failure to prevent civil rights violations. The HOA's insurance company refused coverage, leaving them personally liable for millions in damages. Judge Martinez's sentencing statement was uncompromising. Ms. Kellerman, you used fabricated authority to terrorize vulnerable residents in their own homes. You handcuffed a disabled veteran for the crime of checking his mail. This represents the worst kind of abuse, systematic oppression disguised as community service. Patricia received 12 years in federal prison, followed by supervised probation with restrictions preventing her from holding any position of authority over others. The conviction sent shockwaves through the HOA industry nationwide. Patricia's case became precedent for federal prosecution of residential community abuse, with her mugshot serving as a cautionary tale for power-hungry board members everywhere. Our neighborhood transformed completely. The new HOA board implemented resident rights protections, banned all enforcement equipment, and created an appeals process for any citations. Most importantly, they recognized that community standards should accommodate everyone, not exclude those deemed different. Marcus's recovery was remarkable. Not just physically, the trauma of being handcuffed and helpless had deeply affected him. But seeing Patricia held accountable and watching our community rally around us gave him back his sense of dignity and safety. The settlement from the civil lawsuit funded accessibility improvements throughout the neighborhood. Wheelchair-accessible walkways, disabled parking spaces, and ramps where needed. What had been a source of discrimination became a model of inclusion. 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, Marcus and I were sitting on our porch when a new family moved in across the street. The father was a young veteran using a prosthetic leg. I watched as neighbors immediately offered help, bringing food and sharing information about local resources. "Remember when Patricia called your wheelchair a safety hazard?" I asked Marcus. He smiled, watching children play around his chair without fear or curiosity, just acceptance. "Now kids ask if they can ride in it. Much better upgrade." Patricia Kellerman thought her clipboard and fake badges gave her the right to handcuff disabled veterans in their own neighborhoods. She learned that real badges, the ones carried by federal agents and prosecutors, come with real consequences. Today, our community is stronger, safer, and more inclusive than ever. Patricia's 12-year sentence means she misses her grandchildren's graduations, her own retirement, and the chance to rebuild the relationships she destroyed with her cruelty. The most beautiful irony, the handcuffs she used to terrorize Marcus now hang in our garage, a reminder that those who abuse power eventually find themselves restrained by the very system they tried to circumvent. If you're facing HOA abuse, document everything, know your rights, and never hesitate to contact proper authorities. Sometimes the person being targeted has exactly the resources needed to ensure justice is served. What would you have done if you found your loved one handcuffed by a neighborhood bully? Share your thoughts below, and if this story inspired you, subscribe for more tales where justice doesn't just win, it protects those who need it most.